welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am sharing my top 8 tips for a day trip. These tips are not necessarily just for a day trip, but that is fresh in my mind because I recently went on a day trip with my sister to New York City. We flew there for one day and one day only, like literally flew there in the early morning and came home the same evening. It was so much fun and absolutely doable from Raleigh because it's only an hour flight from Raleigh to New York City. But I thought it would be super fun to share some of the things I learned and took away from doing a day trip like that. And this video actually was not my idea. Shout out to my subscriber, Brittany. Hey girl. It was her idea for me to share some of the tips and tricks that I would recommend if you want to do a day trip like this. This video is obviously not just for people who are flying. Obviously, if you're taking a driving day trip, these would apply as well. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so below and let's jump right into these 8 tips. The first tip I would suggest for a day trip is to do your research. I love to research any topic all the time. So I absolutely loved this part of the process. If you are flying, especially into a big city, I highly recommend doing some research on your airport options as well as your options for getting to and from the airport to the main part of your destination. Many large cities have more than one airport, so I highly recommend doing the research to see which one has the best options to getting to and from the airport in the quickest fashion. Since you're going to New York City, I did research for all 3 of the New York airports. I have flown into LaGuardia before and I knew that the public transportation options can be a little difficult and also just time consuming to get into Manhattan from LaGuardia. And it seemed to me that Newark and JFK kind of have the best and quickest options to use public transportation. So that's what we did. We flew into JFK, we took the air train from JFK to the Jamaica stop, then switched to the Long Island Railroad or the LIRR. And that took us right into Penn Station, right in Manhattan. And that was perfect. It only took like 40 or 45 minutes. It was a super easy and quick process. And I highly recommend that. Newark has a similar option. So I really recommend that when flying into New York. The reason we weren't considering an option like a cab or an Uber is because we were flying in and out during like prime rush hour times. So we figured it would be way faster. And when I looked that up on Google Maps, it was significantly faster to take public transportation. So highly recommend doing some research beforehand, even if you're driving. I think it would be really helpful to kind of eye up some like parking areas, especially if you're driving into a large city. I think it's really helpful to kind of have an idea of your parking options in advance. Tip number 2 is to make a plan and map it out. This might be my biggest tip because this really helped us in New York and saved a ton of time. So our main approach to this was that we wanted to be able to still be spontaneous, but kind of have a rough idea of some spots that we definitely wanted to stop at during our day in New York. We had some top priority restaurants, coffee shops, some Christmas markets we wanted to check out. So what's so nice about Google Maps is you can create a list on Google Maps, add all of the places that you want to go to in your destination, and then it will pin them on the map for you. So I'll actually go ahead and put a screenshot here of the list I made for our New York City trip. And it was so nice because I could kind of zoom out on the map and see roughly where all of our pins were. And because of that, I was able to see that a lot of them were in one area that we could probably walk to most of those stops. And then I saw, okay, we'll probably take the subway to go up to the Upper West Side for dinner. And it was very nice because then we were able to kind of have a rough timeline of events, which I think is really helpful, especially if you're doing a day trip because your time is a little more limited. So obviously, especially if you're flying, you are gonna have to kind of keep time in mind because you're going to have to leave time to get to the airport, get through the airport, and to your gate. So I highly recommend kind of mapping out your top priority spots and then building your day around that. Speaking of maps, I highly recommend this list here. To the angel among us who created this, thank you. This came in clutch when we were in New York City. I will link this list below. It is basically a list of public restrooms in different cities. And in New York, if you've been, you know that like once you're outside of a restaurant or a coffee shop, like it is hard to find a public restroom. And because of this list, I was able to find an Athleta in Soho that happened to have a public restroom. I would have never checked there in a million years, and it was glorious because it was clean. So highly recommend downloading this list to your Google Maps no matter where you're traveling because you never know when you might need it. Tip number 3 is that comfort is key. Wear the comfortable shoes, you guys, especially if you're going to be walking a ton on your day trip or just on your travels in general. For our day trip in New York, I was a little concerned that wearing sneakers would mean that my feet would be cold because it was going to be kind of cold when we were there. I should have just worn the sneakers. I wore a pair of boots that are comfortable, but like, were they over 27,000 steps comfortable? They were not. They were absolutely not. At the end of the day, when we were on the train to the airport, I was like, my feet hurt so bad. They are so swollen in these boots. Having to put them back on after going through security at the airport was like the worst moment of my life. Not being dramatic. So just wear the sneakers. I wish that I would have just worn my ugly New Balance dad sneakers and called it a day, because my feet were like not on their A game for like a few weeks after that trip. So wear the comfortable shoes, especially if you're gonna be walking a lot. I also recommend checking the weather religiously leading up to your day trip, or your trip in general, obviously. It was definitely going to be cold on our day in New York, and I'm very glad that I decided to wear my puffy coat instead of wearing one of my like chicer long wool coats. I definitely needed the puffy coat because it was cold. So keep that in mind when you're in a city, especially if it's going to be cold out. A lot of the times you're going to be in the shade because of the buildings. So just keep that in mind, that it might feel a little bit colder than you're expecting. So I tend to live by the rule that if it's going to be below 40, I am wearing my puffy coat. And sadly not one of my cuter coats. Another thing that I highly recommend bringing to stay comfortable, especially in colder temperatures, is those hot hands. They're little hand warmers. I brought those for my sister and I, and oh my gosh, I will never travel to a cold destination without those. Those were amazing. Highly recommend trying those. Those kept our hands toasty warm all day long. Tip number 4 is to bring a foldable tote. So I swear by the Baggu standard reusable totes. I love those bags. My sister and I both brought one on our trip to New York, and it was the perfect thing to keep in your purse. They're super lightweight. It folds down into a small square and then into a little pouch. I'll actually put a clip, because I did put up a video recently dedicated to my love of Baggu, but I will put a little clip here of what those look like. That was amazing. I highly recommend, even if you're driving on a day trip, I highly recommend bringing something like that with you, because it's just nice to have a catch-all for anything you might buy throughout the day. So that's exactly what I used it for when we were in New York. There were some items that I bought at the Christmas markets. I bought some cookies to take home, and then on the train to the airport, I was so hot, so wetting. So I took off my coat and shoved it in that bag, and then I didn't have to carry all that stuff, and it was so nice. So highly recommend having a little reusable tote bag to take with you, especially one that is lightweight and folds down to basically nothing. Tip number 5 is to bring a portable charger. I would say if there was one thing that you absolutely need to bring on a day trip, it is a portable charger. I don't know what we would have done without that, because we were taking so many photos and videos and obviously using the map app on our phone like all day. And with this portable charger that I brought with us, I was able to charge both my phone and my sister's phones like to 100 multiple times throughout the day. It was absolutely amazing. So I do really like the one that I got, and I can link that in the description below. I like it because it holds its battery for like the longest time. Even with my sister and I like repeatedly charging our phones to 100, its battery did not die one time. Like, I still had battery left when I got home at the end of the day. Plus it has 4 different cords that have different like charging options, which is super nice. Like, it has USB-C, USB, like the older iPhone charger on it. So that is so nice, especially if you're traveling with someone who might have other charging cables than what you normally need. And then you also don't need to bring your charging cable. It's all right in one thing. One thing I will say is that because it is a little bit more high powered, it was a little heavy, but it wasn't heavy enough that I would have like wanted to go without it. It was a need. I would say that the MVPs of the trip were the portable charger and the hot hands. Like, truly, all day we were like, these 2 things, couldn't have done it without them. My 6th tip is to pack light. I packed my purse the night before, and I basically like held myself to the highest standard. I was like, Christy, if you are not absolutely sure you're going to need this, leave it behind. And it was the best decision that I made. I debated on bringing my film camera, which I usually take with me everywhere, but I just knew that it was gonna be a busy day. I knew that I was gonna wanna be filming for a vlog for my channel, and I was like, I'm not gonna be switching between my phone and this camera. I just need to let it go. So I left my film camera at home, and that was a really good choice. I knew that I wasn't going to use it as much as I was going to want to, even though I was in New York. So it probably wasn't worth to take it. So I'm glad that I left it behind. I also typically carry like 12 lip products at any given moment in my purse. And I only brought 2 on this trip. So good job, Christy. Basically, if I wasn't 100% sure that I would use it on our day trip, I left it behind and it was the best decision. Tip number 7 is to bring a little first aid kit. Now, hopefully you're not going to need this, but I do think in situations like this, it's better to be safe rather than sorry. I have this tiny little pouch that I keep in my bag at all times, and I brought that on the trip to New York. It's just this tiny, tiny little pouch. It's like literally this big. It's actually from Target. I'll put a picture here, but it is very small. And in that, I put a bunch of Band-Aids because obviously we are not needing any blisters when we're walking around New York City all day. But I also included some Advil, some Excedrin migraine, and my allergy medicine. Now, I normally don't take those things very often. I actually don't take medicine much at all, but I was like, we have one day in New York. We are here for literally like just over 12 hours. There is no way I'm going to be brought down by like a migraine or an allergy attack. Like, absolutely not. So I brought those things with me just in case either of us could need anything like that. And I didn't end up needing any of it, thank goodness, but I felt really good about the fact that I had it just in case. My 8th and final tip for taking a day trip is to go with the flow. I feel like since you only have one day in your chosen destination, it's really easy to start to get very anxious about the time and kind of your timeline of events. There can be like a level of pressure since you have such a short amount of time. You're like, I just want to get there. I want to maximize my time there. I want to fit everything in that I possibly can. And because of that, it can be kind of hard to not stress when things aren't going 100% to plan. For example, since we went to New York in December, the plane had to be de-iced on our way there and on our way back, so it only caused like a slight delay. But you know, in the moment you're like, oh my gosh, I could already be on my way to New York. This is like wasting time. What is happening? But I told myself the day before that I just need to kind of let things go and just like enjoy the experience for what it is. Obviously, you only have a day in your destination. You can only fit in so many things. Not everything is gonna go perfectly to plan, and that is okay. The excitement is in taking the day trip, seeing what you're able to see, having that experience, especially with another person if you're traveling with somebody else. So I think that that's really important to keep in mind and just try to go with the flow as much as possible. So those are my 8 tips for taking an awesome day trip. I hope that those are helpful for you guys. And obviously these tips can be applied to longer travel as well. These are just some core things that I took away from my day trip to New York City. Just some things that I felt could be helpful if you're gonna take a day trip, whether you're flying or driving. I really hope this is helpful for you. If you have any tips for day trips or travel in general, feel free to leave them in the comments below so we can all learn from each other and talk about traveling because it's just so much fun. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so below. Thank you so much for watching my videos. As always, I really appreciate you being here, and I will see you in the next one.